Star Wars, one of the greatest franchise of films ever to be constructed. It's the perfect pinnacle storytelling of all storytelling. At least that's what I used to believe. But what if I told you I and so many like me were very wrong about Star Wars? And its true perfection lies in its imperfections. Get your kid's ass out of here. Hello. I'm Discord Jedi Knight, and while I mostly am an NLP content creator, I want to at least make a few videos on another franchise I truly once loved. Today, we're talking about Star Wars, and the most important lesson I ever was able to take away from it. Now, originally, I just wanted to do the classic movie review-style video I set out to do with the script. And yes, I can share my thoughts on Star Wars in both this and other videos if you like. But I have a bit more I want to say with this video than just that. I want to reflect on my own stupidity as a former Star Wars fan. Yes, that is right. I no longer consider myself a hardcore fan. I barely even consider myself a casual fan. This video isn't going to be about how I hate Star Wars now, how Star Wars has changed, or how it's so much worse. Simply put, I don't care for that type of content. I did a long time ago, but I grew out of it. I grew out of the toxicity, which yes, I indeed had in my younger days. No, what I want to do is simply share what is easily the most important lesson Star Wars has ever given me. Star Wars is a fantastic source to learn from about a number of things, and I have a long list of lessons from the series that I, to this day, take to heart. For one thing, the tragic story of Anakin Skywalker teaches me that if I let rage and hatred into my heart, even if it's for a good reason, it will send me down a spiral of emptiness. Yet despite that, somehow I originally forgot that lesson and went down that path, until I eventually felt empty and had to refine my own light again. More on that in a sec. And it teaches that even if I do that, which yeah I did, I have a choice, and it doesn't matter how far it goes or how bad it gets. The lesson Vader teaches is that we can always choose to be better, and we can always start now. I love the fact that Vader also goes out not caring about whether or not the world hates him, but about what his family thinks of him. The fact that Luke knows he turned for him to smile at the end of his life. It truly shows that it doesn't matter what the world thinks. It's about what you and the ones you care about most think. Another lesson I'd really enjoy and can take away from Star Wars is the complex portrayal of politics and the way the world really works. Some people think Star Wars is just lightsabers and magic, and they find the politics absolute boring. Which, yeah, politics can very much be that, but Star Wars teaches a lot, mostly in the Clone Wars, especially about trade routes, government corruption, and how people can use both sides of the argument against each other for their own selfish gain. It shows how easily you can be distracted by hate and toxicity and never realize you're being played like a fool by a power that wishes to control you. The only way around it is to not see the person next to you as the enemy, but to find the real enemy lurking in the shadows. Palpatine's takeover is easily one of the greatest stories ever told. He is, without a doubt, the Phantom Menace. You never see him coming. A devil in disguise, a nice smile filled with eyes of wickedness. And it teaches you to be wary of those in your life that are like that. Not to mention the classic tropes of good versus evil, the grays of society, the little rebellion against a great threat, friendship, the tragedy of war, the list goes on and on. But as good and important lesson Star Wars has ever taught me is one that the majority of people fail at, and that is simply nothing is ever perfect. When I was a Star Wars fan, I thought that Star Wars, that the original trilogy was perfect and that to criticize it was not only wrong but foolish. It was the pinnacle of storytelling, and a very high pedestal, saying to myself, this is what storytelling should be, that there are no imperfections, and that if I want to create something, it has to be perfect like this. Along with that shelf, I put what I thought was the greatest. I am a classic Disney fanboy who loves The Lion King in so many of those films. And while I wasn't that big into DreamWorks, I loved How to Train Your Dragon, and I liked TV shows like Avatar, The Last Airbender, SpongeBob SquarePants, and so many more, especially anime like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. And then I turned to myself, something I should not have done, and looked at my own work, whether it be storytelling, drawing, or anything else that I did. I wanted to be like the best. I wanted to be perfect. I often remember feeling so insecure about my work that I would never share it with anyone, scared of judgment because of my own judgment. Until one day, I stopped altogether and instead fed only the hate and toxicity of the fandom. But then I rewatched Star Wars, I rewatched Naruto, and a lot of other things as I became an adult. And guess what? Star Wars is a goddamn mess of flaws. A New Hope was a struggle for George Lucas just to get off the ground, and Darth Vader, for how cool he looks, really comes off as a side villain, which he was originally supposed to be. You could have killed Vader off there, and no one would have been the wiser. Not to mention how ridiculous it is that out of all the tech they put in the Death Star, there is a major flaw the rebels can exploit. Granted, I know the retcon from Rogue One is probably the best thing to ever come out of the new age of Star Wars. But even so, the fact that they did almost nothing once it was discovered to have this flaw is ridiculous at best. Plus, the age-old Stormtrooper walking in and bumping his head on the door, that's a flaw that actually improved the movie. And it goes on from there. Luke kisses his sister. The prequels have their flaws. The Clone Wars has its flaws. Star Wars is a story about self-improvement, really. The technology is always improving. The techniques are always improving. The storytelling is always improving. And yet, even so, Star Wars, with everything you would think is finally a masterpiece, is really just an amalgamation of cracks. This so-called gem is full of them. And so many would hate it because of that. But take a look at the gem. Yes, it has cracks. It's imperfect, but each imperfection gives it character, gives it a story beyond the original story. It's perfect in its imperfections. That isn't to say we shouldn't call out its imperfections, but that we should then take a lesson from them. In fact, I say the best comparison to it is actually probably a human. Imagine a fat guy who is really imperfect and then chooses to get into shape. And if you look at his muscles, you think he's perfect at first glance. But you look at him again, and his arms aren't big enough where he still has fat around his midsection. Which bothers him, but he'll tell you despite that. HES happy because each flaw is him. It's his story, and guess what? He might never be perfect despite striving for it. But he can be happy with the progress that he made. He can be happy with the fact that he's no longer fat and chubby. He's happy with himself and the story he's got to this point. Now in just writing myself at this point, lol, back on topic. What I mean by this analogy is it is theirs who give up on striving to be better that fail before they even begin. Especially if you think that you have to be perfect. No human in the Star Wars galaxy, not even Anakin Skywalker himself, is perfect. Not Luke, not you, no one. And neither is anyone in the real world. So nothing we create will ever be perfect either, and a lot of you might say, well, that's sad. But it's the exact opposite. Once I left the fandom, or was slowly leaving the fandom, I could take a closer look at the whole picture and discover for myself this lesson. And then once I had, I turned to myself, to my stories, to my art. I found happiness in the fact that I can put my work on the shelf next to the greatest. Not only that, but I can learn from their mistakes and self-improve my art and my storytelling, not because I want it to be perfect, but because I want to improve for myself. At the end of the day, I can remind myself that this weight of being perfect isn't real, and I can release something even if it's imperfect, and still receive both praise and judgment without being scared of it. And yeah, I get it. How can you dare take your silly little story, a story that hasn't come close to getting the major views or the money that Star Wars or any other story you have on that shelf? How can you praise your own work like those? How dare you? But that's the point, isn't it? That's the point of this video. You can. Why can you? Because nothing is perfect, and neither are those stories. I'm not putting my stories up there because I think they're perfect. Because I see all stories with flaws. We can endlessly debate which is better than the other. But at the end of the day, what we should all take away from all of this is it's just a story. Nothing is perfect. George Lucas, nor Kishimoto, who wrote Naruto, nor J.K. Rowling for Harry Potter, or hell anyone. None of these creators went into this thinking I'm going to make a masterpiece. They went into it because they had a story to tell and had the confidence to tell it. It is those with that confidence who actually make it. Have confidence in your own work. Now, when someone criticizes my work, I thank them for it. I know I'm not perfect. I know I can be better, but I also know that despite wanting to be better, I will never be perfect, and I don't have to be. It doesn't mean I shouldn't strive to be better. It only means I don't have to worry about that, and I can take that load of stress off of me. This is the greatest lesson I learned from Star Wars, and for that matter, every story that I have ever enjoyed. This is the lesson I hope more people learn. to stop being at each other's throats over it. Now, you think this was just a Star Wars video, but I am an MLP channel. This goes for MLP as well. There are many flaws within My Little Pony, both G4, yes, and yes, G5. And despite my enjoyment of the former than the latter, I feel like we all need to take a step back at times and realize that while sure, one is definitely superior to the other, and it's okay to debate and discuss those flaws, it's also important not to get wrapped up in the toxicity of it all. Also, when you do that, when you think something is perfect and you defend it like it is, it messes with your head. That's what happened to me with Star Wars. I don't want it to happen to you with MLP. We're all fans at the end of the day, and so to end this video off, I actually think Twilight and her friends sang it best. Sing it, girls.
I never claimed to be perfect. My mistakes are all written in ink. None of us claim to be perfect.
And it's sad if that's what you all think.
Our flaws help to make us special.
They bond us and keep us strong.
Our flaws are what brought us together.
Well,
stop acting like nothing's wrong.
We're not flawless. We're a work in progress. We got dents and we got quirks, but it's our flaws that make us work.
Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if you're more of my thoughts as a former fan of Star Wars. With that said, do remember to subscribe, like, share, and never forget, not only are you not perfect, but friendship is magic.